Hi everyone. You can hear me from the back of the room? Okay, cool. Thanks. So, at the beginning, let me start by asking you a few questions. So, did you ever had a situation when you wrote some application and it just didn't work on some specific device, not to mention Samsung, yeah, or some Huawei devices? Or did you ever wanted to use some specific API for animations, for example, but you couldn't use it because your system version was too low to support this? Or did you ever heard something like, you know, just do it like on Android or do it like on iOS, yeah? And you're just tired of this? If the answer is yes, then I think I've got something for you. So today I would like to introduce you Flutter and how to make a beautiful app in an hour, but not only. So yeah, my name is Paulina Szklarska. I came to you from Poland, from Wrocław. I used to work as an Android developer for a couple of years, but now I work as a Flutter developer. And I'm also running a couple of events in Wrocław for Android developers. And you can meet me at Medium, at GitHub, at Twitter, and in many other places probably also. Okay, so what this presentation will be about? It will be about Flutter, of course, and what Flutter is, how is Flutter different from the solutions that we already have on the market, how to make a simple Flutter application, how does it work under the hood, and about the possibilities that you may think about during this presentation. Yeah, so let me start by what is Flutter. So Flutter, as in the description of my presentation, is a framework created by the Google team, announced at Google I/O in the last year. And it is a framework for creating cross-platform mobile applications. And cross-platform means that we have one single code base, and from this code base, there are created two applications, for Android and for iOS. And with a single code base, there are benefits, of course, like we don't need two development teams, we don't need two QAs, two project managers, and so on. Yeah? So Flutter gives us this possibility. And in Flutter, we are writing code using Dart. Dart is a language that is not very common for mobile developers, but its syntax is very similar to something like Java. So yeah, it's quite easy to get used to it. And the big news is that Flutter is now in a stable version since Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big news, like we were waiting for this a long, long time. Yeah, so what is so cool about Flutter? So Flutter concept is very similar to the concept of creating web pages. So for example, if you are writing some web page, then you just save the file and you will see the changes immediately, yeah? And that's how the feature called hot reload works in Flutter. So for example, you see this simple application. So you have some button. When you tap the button, the counter increments, yeah, and you see this. And let's just see what happens if we change something in the code. So for example, we have this text tapped, yeah? We can change this text to clicked. We can tap hot reload, and we'll see changes immediately, yeah, like in 300 milliseconds, so just like this. And what is so cool about hot reload is that hot reload is stateful. So as you can see in the code, we have some counter value, and let me just, yeah, and oh, okay, now if we change this value and if we tap hot reload, we will see this counter remains the same, yeah? So it doesn't change this value. So we can rebuild the whole application with its current state, yeah? So it's like we don't need to wait a few minutes or more than a few minutes to see the changes. Okay, the second thing is that when Flutter creators decided to create Flutter, they review a list of applications that were most are rewarded for their design, yeah? So they got two conclusions from those applications. One is that in most of those applications, the UI is very custom. You will not see there some kind of material design or Apple-style design. Yeah, this is very custom design. And the second thing is that on most of those applications, design between Android and iOS was very, very similar. Yeah, so this is what they decided to do. They decided to put the main effort into creating a highly beautiful and highly custom UI that will look exactly the same on both platforms. But Flutter is not only about custom UI, so we have full catalogs of widgets that are very similar to the native ones. So for example, we have a catalog for material design widgets, something that we know, for example, floating action button, yeah, tab bars, and so on, and also dedicated for Apple Cupertino widgets, yeah. And the cool thing is that you may use actually those widgets independently from the platform. So for example, we can have Cupertino widgets in Android app if we'd like to, or we can have material design widgets in iOS application. We can do it. And all of those widgets, they will look exactly the same no matter of version of Android, no matter version of system, yeah. So on the old Android, new Android, the iOS, they will all look the same. Okay, so how is Flutter different? Because we already have some solutions for crafting cross-platform applications. Yeah, we have some React Native, for example. How is Flutter new? So in an example of React Native, so we have some code. We have some application code written in JavaScript, and under the hood there is a platform with their widgets. Yeah, so when we write in a React Native text, actually, we are using text view from Android SDK or UI text view from iOS platform, yeah? So whenever we'd like to access some UI from the React Native, and the rendering part is done here. So whenever we'd like to access this UI, we need to go through the bridge. And as JavaScript itself is pretty fast, and the platform code itself is also pretty fast, but going through this bridge a lot of time is not very efficient. It's not very quickly. And when it comes to animations, for example, or some scrolling, when this UI changes very frequently, then this bridge may slow our application down. So the idea behind the Flutter is to get rid of this bridge. Yeah, so that's exactly how Flutter works. So we don't have this bridge. We have all widgets taken from the platform side to the application code, Dart. So instead of native widgets, we are using only custom widgets. That's the main difference. So in Flutter, we actually don't use anything from the platform code. Yeah, we don't use any Android or iOS SDK's UI widgets. And the rendering part is done here, yeah? So there is no need to, go through some kind of bridge if we'd like to change something on the UI. So actually, comparing to React Native, React Native is more like abstraction layer over the platform code. Yeah, so you're writing such things in a JavaScript, but you are actually using things from Android or iOS SDK. However, in Flutter, we are using the whole new system with its own rendering and with its own UI components. And these are photos taken from the article created by one of the software engineers working at Google with Flutter. And as you can see, Flutter is not only now about mobile development. This is screenshots taken from desktop, from Mac OS system that runs Flutter. And this is a Raspberry Pi that also has a Flutter. So as you can see, Flutter is not only a framework, it's a just whole new engine, just like the game engines work, yeah? So it has its own renderer and its own things to render. Yeah, and the fastest way to check this, that it's not a native UI, you can just turn on Android devices showing layout bounds, yeah? And you will see that according to the Android system, these layouts are empty, yeah? So this is nothing that is rendered very natively. This is all done by Flutter engine. Okay, so what do we get because of Flutter? So our application is fast. like really fast, like 60 FPS is must-have for Flutter application, and even 120 FPS on the devices that support this. And this is all done thanks to Skia, thanks to a 2D graphical engine that is used also in Android, in Chrome, in many other web browsers. The second thing is that we have very flexible way of creating widgets, and because of the concept that in Flutter actually everything is a widget. And you will see this lately when I will show you some code. And by everything is a widget, I mean really everything. So this is the sample of the application, and in this sample, the whole first widget is a scaffold. So the whole application window is actually a widget. And we have also things that we know from the development that are UI components. For example, floating action button is a widget, or a row is a widget, yeah. But the widgets are also things for alignment, such as center, or the widgets itself are also like paddings and margins, yeah. So they are not parameters in Flutter, they are whole new widgets. And there are many, many other. So for example, gestures are also widgets, animations are widgets. Yeah, the paddings, alignments, as I said, it's all about widget. And you will see this lately. And also, Flutter is completely rewritten, but it's still very native and in look and feel. So we have some differences between platforms. For example, the overscroll behavior, yeah, or the bouncing animations after scroll. These are things that are different between Android and iOS devices. And these differences are also implemented in Flutter. Yeah, and the thing that I said previously, that these applications will look the same no matter of the version of the system or the platform. So this is an application called Flutter Gallery. That is some kind of showcase of Flutter possibilities. You can just download this from the Google Play just to see how widgets work and so on. And this application is run on Android device with 711 system. Yeah, so this is quite fun, nothing impressive. But, however, this is the same application called Flutter Gallery, and you will see the same animations, yeah, the same widgets, but this time, this application is run on Android 4.4.4. So guys, this is like 2013, this is like 5 years ago. And yeah, it really blows my mind every time. So this is cool that we can use actually things that were, before the material design was even announced, and we can use it on such old phones, yeah. And on iOS, it will look exactly the same. And also across Samsung, LG, Huawei, all of those devices. But who uses Flutter? Because Flutter is quite new technology, yeah, released for a couple of days actually. But there are already some big companies that use this. For example, Alibaba, they managed to rewrite some part of their application for buying, and it's now used by over 50 million of users. Yeah, so it's pretty big number. Also, Google uses this internally for their projects, such as Google Ads, for example. And also, recently, Reflectly, the company that has application that has very custom, very beautiful UI, they decided to also rewrite their application for a Flutter. And on the Flutter Live, this event recently, they told that they do this in 10 weeks by one person. So I think it's pretty amazing that you can do it so quickly with such a result. Okay, so now how to make a simple application. We'll go step by step by process of creating such an application. And what we'll do is just a simple application showing list of some kind of messages. And there will be no business logic down there. There will be only UI, but of course Flutter is not only for creating UI, it's also for creating the whole application with its logic. Okay, so the entry point for Flutter application is the main function. And the first method to call is to run app. And run app method, it takes widget as a parameter. Yeah. So as I said previously, it's all about widgets. So this is the first time we met some widget, my app. Like, you know, in every demo, there will be my app and so on. Yeah, so my app is basically a stateless widget. That is widget without a state. So it simply just renders UI. And here we are creating the new widget called Material app. So Material app is basically an application that uses Material theme. So it will be more like for Android devices. And in this application, we are creating, of course, we are getting the title. This is not the title that will be in a toolbar or app bar. This is just the title of the whole application. Yeah, because that's actually the application, not the window. Yeah, and in the home, we'll define new widget called scaffold. Scaffold is a widget that has such as parameters like app bar or floating action button or so on, yeah? So we don't need to position them manually, we just need to pass them as the parameters. Yeah, and that's all it takes to create such a beautiful empty application, yeah? These few lines of code are enough to create the whole window of the application, but we want more, yeah? We want more. So we will add app bar. App bar with its title, with new widget called text, welcome to Flutter. And this is how it looks like, welcome to Flutter. And here you can see two things. So one thing is that I don't need really an XML file or some other resource layout. I don't need actually any parameters such as width or height or text color or background color, yeah? As you see, it's all done by Flutter. I don't need to write this. And it's cool if you would like to prototype very fast, yeah? Because as you see, those, I don't know, nearly 10 lines of code are enough to create a simple application. Yes, so we'll go a little further. We will add some body, and inside this body there will be a list. So we just delegate this to the another widget to not make it, you know, like a lot of code. A body will be another widget, and inside this widget we will create a column. Column, this is just like a layout that positions things like vertically, yeah. So one thing under the other. And we'll put this into a flexible because we want our list to take as much space as it can. Yeah, and inside this will be a list itself. So list view builder is something that Android developers may know as a recycler view with its adapter. So in this list view, we have parameters such as item count. So we will have 10 items. An item builder, so the Flutter will know how our item will look like. And our item, we will build this using another widget. Yeah, it's all about widgets. Another widget called list style. So list style is basically a widget that is already prepared for us to have some kind of like the leading, trailing, like the title, subtitle, and so on. So we can just pass those values, for example, leading icon. And we'll see this on the screen. So the second thing that you may notice here is that, you know, I'm just skipping slides, so it's pretty fast. But you can believe me that if we will write this in a code and we'll tap hot reload, we'll see those changes like I'm now skipping slides. So very, very quickly. And it's cool, just cool. So the second thing that you may notice is that I use something that is called icons DOM. And so in Flutter we have a possibility to use many resources that are already prepared. So for example, a set of icons, a set of colors. Yeah, we don't need to, you know, define them. They are just waiting for us to use them. Also we will add some title with some text, and it can yeah, we can see this immediately, and also subtitle with some other text. And as you will see, we don't need to position anything, like anything. That's the whole UI. We don't need to write that this is, padding 4 dps, or I don't know, text smaller, or make it gray, not black, something like this. The Flutter takes care of everything. Of course, we can change this if we'd like to, but we don't. If we don't need to, we don't need to do it. Okay, now I will, for example, just wrap my icon into a circle avatar. Yes, so this will, instead of this, will look like this. And yeah, as you can see, in the Flutter, if you would like to create some kind of new widget, for example, you need to compose it from the smaller ones. So instead of creating the whole widget that will extend something, like I will not extend an icon to create such as a widget. I will just instead compose this from the smaller widgets. And I will also add some trailing, because why not? Okay, so that's the whole UI for the list. And as you see, it's all like, I don't know, this maybe 30 lines of code. It's enough to give me the application with the list. Yeah, and I will just wrap this with the cart, because, material design and so on. And I will add some padding, just so you will see how adding padding looks like. Okay, and now it's pretty much all. But yeah, this application is nice, but, I'm a girl, so I like different colors. I will style this a little bit. So to style this, as I said, we need to use the material app, the one from the first slides. And we will add some theme data. In theme data, we have many parameters, such as colors, swatches, colors for background. It's just like normal theme with color resources. So we can define, for example, that primary swatch will be blue and accent will be pink. And you see that checkbox, they have changed. And I can, for example, change the primary swatch to be purple. Yeah, and now the whole application is purple, as easy as as you see. Yes, and this is all done on the Android emulator. But you can believe me that if we will run this application on iOS, it will look exactly the same. Yeah, so we can have material design on iOS application like for free. Yeah, we don't need to do anything to make it possible. However, I think that this application may not be the most beautiful one as for iOS standards. So with just a couple of switches and couple of changes in the code, we can just change this application to look more iOS style. Guys, I'm an Android developer, so probably this is not 100% iOS style, but yeah, I try to do it this way. Okay, testing. Who likes UI testing? No way. You're not real people. Okay, so I really don't like UI testing in Android. I believe in iOS is very similar, because to make UI testing, you need to use a real device or emulated one. Actually, you need the whole system, whole platform, Android or iOS. Okay, you can of course use some tools for emulating this, but it's still not very convenient, and there are differences between the phones, and so on. In Flutter, UI testing is done pretty much like it will be just unit tests. Unit tests with just pure Java or pure Kotlin or pure Swift code, without any platform. So in Flutter, we can use something called widget tester. And this is the test made for the screen we've seen before. So the names are self-explanatory, but we can go through this. So we will just simply pump widget, so load this. But we actually don't use any real device or emulator or simulator for such a test. It's all like the widget is pumped, but it's not very real. So this test will run like in a few seconds, like they will have no platform code inside. but we can just check the things that we'll normally check using UI testing. So we can just check if there is a list view, exactly one list view. We can check that there is some widget that contains text with title number 0. We can just drag, and we can specifically tell how much pixels do we want to drag, because it's independent from the phone. So it will, no matter of the computer will run this, the test will pass. And yeah, pump just to invoke this action. And we can say that title number 9 is find. Yeah, so we can very easily do UI testing for our applications. Okay, so how Flutter actually works under the hood. So basically, the Flutter engine has 2 parts, actually. So the first one is an engine written in C++ and C, and it consists of Skia, this 2D graphical engine that I've said previously, the Dart itself with its virtual machine, and text for some text rendering stuff. So this is the engine. And on top of the engine, we have the framework itself. And the framework is built like a layer cake. So on the bottom, we have a foundation. On top, we have animation, painting, gestures, and so on. And every layer below, every layer above is built from the layers below. Yeah. So, for example, the material widgets, they are using Cupertino, and Cupertino using widgets, and so on. Yeah. So everything is composed from those layers. And it's all packed into APK file. So for Android building, the APK file, minimum APK file for Flutter is now 4.2 megabytes since November, I believe. So this is the minimum weight of the simplest application containing only one widget. Yeah, because of this Flutter engine that has almost 3 megabytes. Into APK file, we have also, of course, the SDK of the Dart with our application written in Dart. In the simplest case, it's about 1 megabyte. And also the Android application as a host application with our native code, because we can write native code, and I'll show this a little bit later. Yeah, so the whole, these 3 main components are packed into APK file. And a very similar way is for iOS. So in the IPA file, we have also Flutter engine, SDK with our application code, and of course, iOS application written in Objective-C or Swift. Okay, so cool, but there are probably many thoughts that come to your mind during this presentation. What about this? What about this? What about this? I will try to briefly go through those things. So what about, for example, custom UI? Because I showed you the native components, and how about creating custom UI? So in Flutter, we have 2 approaches. One approach is if we'd like to, for example, create such a button, we can use one of the existing widgets. For example, this is the code for this button, but the interesting part is here. So we can, for example, use one of the existing widgets, such as flat button, and we can just change some of those parameters to customize this. For example, a flat button has a parameter called shape. Yeah, in this shape, we can declare that we'd like to have another shape. And every widget has really enormous number of parameters. Yeah, so we can really customize this in every way. Yeah, but sometimes it's not enough. For example, if we'd like to create such as UI, we can use it the similar way we will use it in a native development. So we can use something called custom painter. And in this custom painter, we have access to canvas, and we can just paint on the canvas as we'll do it normally. Yeah, so that's it. But what about, for example, camera, yeah, or Bluetooth, or other services that are very, very specific to the platform, or some background stuff, for example. So in Flutter, we have possibility to communicate with our native applications with something called method channel. So method channel, in this approach, Flutter application is a client, and iOS and Android applications are hosted. So in this approach, we need to write some code on the, for example, in this case, Android side, to listen to the things invoked from Flutter, such as this. So we are just, registering ourselves to listen to the Flutter application. And for example, if we'd like to get battery level, so we'll need to write this code on Android side for getting battery level. And when we have this, we will just pass back the result with the success, with an error, or that it's not implemented. And we will need to do it the same way on iOS side. Yeah, so we'll just do some platform-specific things, and we'll pass the result back. And on the Flutter side, we can just get this result. Yeah, so we will invoke the method from the platform called, for example, get battery level, and we will just have this result here. Yeah, so we are able to invoke the platform code from the Flutter application. However, in most cases, we really don't need to do it, because there are already made many packages for the most common things, such as, for example, shared preferences or getting device info. Yeah, so for those things that are specific to platform, there's a high chance that the package for this is created. And the cool thing about those packages is that they have scoring. So we can see, for example, their popularity, their health, their maintenance, yeah, and the overall score. So we are sure that this library is not deprecated, for example, or if it's just, healthy. Yeah, so we can use it. And as you can see, in many cases, the author of the package is just Flutter team. So they really take care of developers by writing such as things. Okay, now what about Flutter limitations? So yeah, when I gave this presentation like 2 months ago, I have this slide much complicated. So some time ago, it was not possible in Flutter to use, for example, native UI components, such as Google Maps. So we were not able to use Google Maps widgets, such as we will use it in a native application. So we can put map, but we will not, it will be just in a different activity outside of the Flutter. Yeah, so if your application was based on a maps, Flutter wasn't a very good solution. There was also no web equivalent. So React Native has its components that are ready for web. Flutter didn't have those. So it was only for mobile, desktop, and so on. There is no support for 3D graphics because Kia is 2D engine, so it's not possible to use anything 3D. And it's RM only. So the release version can be run only on our RM devices. So it's not possible to run release version on emulator, for example. However, we can run debug version in emulator because it's some kind of RM system emulated. But yeah, in case of release, we are not able to do it. Yes, and the minimum weight of the application is 4.2 megabytes. So if you'd like to make your app an instant app, for example, from Android, that might be a problem because as far as I know, it's maximum of 4 megabytes for instant apps. If you are not using the beta features. Yeah, but this has changed. So there was an event called Flutter Live on Tuesday. Yeah, and they announced a few things. For example, it's now possible to use native UI component in some way. There is some widget that allows us to do this. And there is a web equivalent. It's a project called Hummingbird that it's, I guess, in a very early stage, but it will be possible to use Flutter also on web. Okay, cool, but now we'll stop. No, because yeah, I think that you probably may have many questions, and there are probably many also things that I didn't say about. However, I encourage you, if you're just, a little bit curious about what's Flutter, what can Flutter be, what can be done more with Flutter, I encourage you to take tour on Flutter Code Labs. There are many of them. For example, Flutter UI Code Labs, the simplest one, in which you are creating the simple UI for Flutter. And this one, especially because it's an integration with Firebase, so you can see how integration with some kind of business logic looks like in a Flutter. Okay, so to summarize, just quickly. So Flutter is cool, no doubt about this. This is my opinion. Flutter is very fast in both development because of the hot reload feature, and both as application, 60 FPS, something that is, I think, pretty much awesome. Flutter is super fun in writing, because it's fast, and also it's because of community, Community is very engaged and is very helpful, and if you have any question, probably guys from the Flutter team will help you, and that's something unusual. Flutter is also easy to start, setup is very easy, and you can run this in your IDE, such as Android Studio or IntelliJ IDEA. And also Flutter is, in my opinion, very beautiful. Okay, so if you would like to, for example, see other Flutter applications, you can check them at itsallwidgets.com. This is some kind of showcase with applications from Flutter community. If you would like to, for example, know more about state management, or architectures that are used in a Flutter, this is a cool talk by Brian Egan about Flutter states. If you would like more about, for example, technical details, because I just make some kind of overview, you can just check them at the Flutter site. And if you'd like to, for example, read my article about 5 reasons why you may love Flutter if you are not encouraged enough, then you can check this. And thanks. Now I guess we have time for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is it possible that in future Apple decides to ban all Flutter apps in App Store?
So the same question is on the Flutter site in a section, some kind of FAQ. They are writing something like, so this is not my opinion, that they hope that this will not be done, but as far for now, it's not done already, so I'm not sure if they even have possibility to disable this, what they need to know, developers, to make it possible, so they will not, be angry about this. So I hope not.
Thanks for your talk. I have a question. In my experience, designers, it's a rare case when designers want exactly the same design for 2 apps, iOS and Android. And what ways or options Flutter provide to solve these situations? You showed a screenshot where there were UI switch elements, difference on iOS and Android, and how to fix these using the same code.
So now the easiest way is to just use if, because you have access to the platform. So you're writing just if platform is Android, then it may sound silly or funny, but you can wrap it, of course, in such as, abstract widgets, So, for example, you can build a toolbar widget that will do it inside, but basically it's all about, just checking your platform. So,
Okay, and another one question. And what about localization? I mentioned that all text was written in a row, like titles, and does Flutter have any localization system built in?
You mean for different languages?
Yes.
So yeah, it's built in. It's a package called internationalization, and you can done it in a very similar way to Android. So actually, you don't have an XML file with strings. You need to build some kind of class that will store the strings. But you have possibility to check the locale, and Flutter will reload your application immediately when someone changes language in the system.
Okay. Thank you for speech. My question is, can we start to use Flutter in existing projects?
Oh, yeah, that's a cool question. I wanted to say something about this, but I was aware that, I will not make this on a time. So yeah, integrating Flutter into existing application is a very common case, and it's so creators, they designed something called module, so you can have Flutter inside your existing application as module. So it's basically about you have your Flutter project, next to the Android or iOS project, and you will implement this in like 5 or 6 lines of code. So you're basically invoking this as this will be another activity or another fragment in case of Android. So yeah, it's possible, and it's quite okay done, because I'm using this normally. Yeah, and there are also cases such as a Groupon company. They decided to put Flutter into their application, and they will do it just like this by integrating into existing one.
Thank you for the talk. I'd like to ask about meta channel. It wasn't very clear how are they different from the React Native bridge. Aren't they platform calls?
Yeah, so the concept of this meta channel is very similar to the React Native bridge. The case, so this might be misunderstood. So Flutter also has bridges, such as those meta channels, but the thing is that we don't need to use them very frequently, because usually in React Native we use them when we want to access UI, yeah? We want to change UI. In Flutter, that's not the case. We don't need to do it. But if we like to, for example, read battery state or something like this, then yeah, this is some kind of bridge.
Thanks.
Thank you. What about Google Maps in the future? We can wait for realization.
Yeah, so this is the slide that I showed at the end. So at this Flutter Live, they announced something called platform widget. I'm not sure, but this is thanks to this you are able to use widgets that are from the platform. So in theory, you are able to use, for example, Google Maps in your Flutter application. But to be honest, I haven't tried them because they are released like a few days ago. I didn't get a chance to see this. Yeah, there is a question. There's a question.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I want to ask you, maybe it's a similar question. As an Android developer, you know that you should use a different resource dependent on your tablet or phone, depending on the high resolution screen and so on. Is it possible to use it in Flutter?
Yes, so it is possible. However, it is possible. However, it's usually not. Usually, you don't need to do this, because Flutter, the way he builds UI, is like not like in Android. There is very strict. Like you have 20 padding, 20 GP padding from the left or so on. So it's more like based on constraints. So if you have, for example, tables or such device with uncommon resolution, it will render very good. So you have possibility, but usually you don't need to do this.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a few questions. Thanks for the talk, first of all. Because we don't have a hierarchy of widgets in our screen, so it seems to be impossible to write end-to-end tests, let's say, using Calabash. Is it true?
I'm not sure what the Calabash is.
Calabash.
Calabash, okay.
So it's access directly widgets, let's say, from Android or from iOS, and reads data from it and compares and so checks.
Okay, but end-to-end test, you mean some kind of integration test or testing on a real device or real?
Exactly, last case.
Yeah, so you have a possibility to test this. So yeah, there are actually three types of tests. There are unit tests or the pure testing, such as using a pure test package. We have widget tests and we have this integration test. And integration tests, they run on a real device.
But I mean tests that clicks on buttons, go through the different flows
like
and so on.
Automated testing UI.
Yes.
To be honest, I don't know if this is.
Okay, and one more question. What about wearable devices like watches or television, Android Auto?
Yeah, they're not supported, unfortunately, for now.
And last question, what about reactive programming?
Yeah, so it is possible because Flutter in many ways is very similar to React Native. So we have, of course, possibility to use, there's, for example, package called Eric's Dart for reactive programming, and the also common approaches known from React Native, such as architectures, such as Redux or Flux. They are also very convenient to use in a Flutter, and there are already made packages to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the speech. I have a question about architecture.
Where is this?
Here, in first row. So, does Flutter provide any architectures like MVC, MVP, or MVVM? What about data binding?
Yeah, so architectures are the whole another topic for a whole another presentation, to be honest. But yeah, so it's possible to have architectures such as MVP, MVC, or MVVM. They will look a little bit different because you don't have a support that you have normally from a native platform, but they are possible. And data binding, no, it's not supported. So yeah, the things like data binding or the architecture components from Android, they're not supported. Someone needs to write this.
Thank you for your lecture. I would like to know some information about the Poland market. You told that you have changed your sphere and became cross-platform developer. I would like to know, have you done it because this position is demanded or search for interest? And I would like also know, is the cross-platform developer position demanded in Poland? It's not about only Flutter, maybe it's React Native or Xamarin. Thank you.
So yeah, the first question, so I just got lucky because someone from the company that I found was looking especially for Flutter developer. So they knew about Flutter and they wanted just to check this. So yeah, I got lucky because Flutter, to be honest, is not very popular in Poland. I can say that we know every Flutter developer, in our community because there are not so many of them. And to the second question, so cross-platform, it is popular, quite popular, I think I can say in Poland, but not Flutter. React Native has like all of those cross-platform companies, and yeah, Flutter is not popular at all.
Thank you for speech. Depends on some performance test. Flutter is at least 2 times slower than native. So have you met some performance issues?
By slower, you mean the frames per second?
I mean lagging, lost frames.
Okay, so there is one thing you need to know. So if you're running Flutter in a debug mode, it might be very, very slow because if the hot reload needs to work, we need to inject the code into a virtual machine, and it's not possible to have such as performance because of this. Yeah. So Flutter must run in a realistic version to have all those FPS. So yeah, that might be the case because in a normal situation, it's really very, very, very close to the native performance. Like you will not see the difference in my testing, but your results may vary.